Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe and support me. In the cold expanse of space, where silence reigned supreme and the only movement came from distant celestial bodies, the galactic frontier station was a testament to human ingenuity. A sprawling space station orbiting a forgotten planet, it was a hub for research, tourism, and exploration. It was also a symbol of humanity's reliance on advanced technology, especially the cutting-edge bionic systems that had become an integral part of everyday life. Among its inhabitants was Dr. Ethan Ward, a man who was not entirely human anymore. Ethan stared at his reflection in the medical bay mirror. His face appeared tired, with shadows under his eyes, but the real fatigue lay deep within. The quiet hum of his bionic heart was a constant reminder of the price he had paid for survival. His left arm, too, was a marvel of bionic engineering, as smooth and seamless, its movements mimicking the real thing with uncanny precision. But it was his mind, enhanced with neural implants, that set him apart from others. The implants allowed him to process information faster, make split-second decisions, and multitask like no ordinary human could. He sighed, rubbing his temples. The day had been long, filled with routine medical checkups and minor emergencies, nothing out of the ordinary. But there was an uneasy tension in the air, one that Ethan couldn't shake. Something felt off, like the calm before a storm. His communicator beeped, breaking his reverie. It was Nova, the eye that ran most of the station's systems. Dr. Ward, Commander Kane requests your presence in the control room. It seems urgent. Ethan frowned. Commander Tobias Kane was not the kind of man to make idle requests. He was a traditionalist, one of the few who distrusted the growing influence of bionic technology. Their relationship had always been strained, with Kane frequently questioning the reliability of Ethan's bionic team. On my way, Ethan replied, slipping on his medical coat as he headed for the door. As he walked through the station's corridors, the low hum of machinery and the soft glow of the overhead lights gave the illusion of peace. But beneath that, Ethan knew the station was a complex web of interconnected systems, all vulnerable to failure if something went wrong. When he reached the control room, Kane was standing by the large observation window, his arms crossed, staring out into the void. Zora Blake, Ethan's second in command, was there as well, her bionic arm glinting under the harsh lights. You wanted to see me? Ethan asked, his voice neutral. Kane turned, his face a mask of barely concealed frustration. We've been getting some irregular readings from the station's systems. Power fluctuations, minor glitches. Nova has been working to fix them, but I'm concerned it might be a sign of something bigger. Ethan raised an eyebrow. And you think it's related to the bionics? Kane's jaw tightened. I don't know, but with all the bionic enhancements on this station, it's a possibility we can't ignore. I want you and your team ready for anything. If those systems start failing, we could be looking at a catastrophic situation. Ethan exchanged a glance with Zara, who shrugged slightly. She was used to Kane's paranoia about bionics, but even she seemed on edge today. We'll run diagnostics on our equipment, Ethan said calmly. But I don't think bionics are the issue here. This station has been running for years without any major problems. Kane's eyes narrowed. Just make sure your team is ready. If things go south, I'm not risking this station's integrity because of a malfunction in one of your people. With that, Kane turned back to the window, dismissing them with a wave of his hand. As they left the control room, Zara shook her head. He's never going to trust us, you know that, right? Ethan sighed. I know. But it doesn't matter. We've got a job to do, and we'll do it. Keep an eye on the diagnostics. I don't like this talk of glitches. Zara nodded and peeled off toward the engineering bay while Ethan returned to the medical wing. He spent the next few hours reviewing reports, his mind wandering to the nagging feeling of impending disaster. He was just finishing up when the station's alarms blared to life. Attention, all personnel. This is not a drill. We are experiencing a critical systems failure. All hands to emergency stations. Ethan's heart skipped a beat, his bionic heart immediately compensating. He grabbed his communicator. Nova, report. Nova's calm, synthesized voice came through. Dr. Ward, we've sustained a massive impact from a solar flare. Several systems are offline, including life support in some sections. There are thousands of passengers trapped. Damn it, Ethan muttered. Deploy the bionic rescue team. We need to get to the affected areas now. He rushed out of the medical bay, meeting Zara and the rest of the team at the central hub. Each member of the bionic rescue team was equipped with advanced enhancements to superhuman strength, reflexes, and specialized medical tools built into their bodies. They were humanity's best hope in situations like this. What's the status? Ethan asked as he strapped on his gear. Multiple breaches in the outer hull, Zara reported. Life support's failing in 3 sections. We've got fires in 2 more, and communication with the lower decks is spotty at best. Ethan nodded, his mind racing. Alright, split the team. Zara, take half and secure the life support systems. I'll leave the rest to the lower decks and get those people out. Zara hesitated. Ethan, you're harder. I'll be fine, he cut her off. We don't have time to waste. With that, the team split up, each member heading toward their designated areas. Ethan's group made their way to the lower decks, where the situation was dire. The station's corridors were filled with smoke, and the air was thin. Bodies lay strewn across the floor, some unconscious, others barely clinging to life. Ethan's neural implants kicked into overdrive, analyzing each person's vitals in a split second. He directed his team to administer emergency care while he moved from one passenger to the next, stabilizing them as best he could. But as they worked, Ethan's bionic systems began to falter. His heart stuttered, sending a sharp pain through his chest. He gritted his teeth, ignoring it. Now was not the time to show weakness. Ethan, one of his teammates called. We've got a major problem. The core is destabilizing. If we don't fix it soon, the whole station's going to blow. Ethan cursed under his breath. Zara, do you copy? Her voice crackled through the communicator. Barely. What's going on down there? The core's failing. We need to get it stabilized, or we're all dead. There was a pause, then Zara's voice came through, more steady. I'm on it. Just hold things together until I get there. Ethan could feel his body betraying him as the bionic heart continued to malfunction. His vision blurred for a moment, but he shook it off, focusing on the task at hand. His communicator beeped again. This time, it was Nova. Dr. Ward, I must inform you that the solar flare has caused significant damage to my systems as well. I am unable to maintain full control of the station's operations. Damn it, Nova, I need you. Ethan snapped, the pressure mounting. I will do what I can, Nova replied, her voice tinged with an unsettling hint of vulnerability. Ethan gritted his teeth. It was a race against time. His body was failing. The station was on the brink of destruction, and the only thing standing between thousands of lives and death was a man who could barely keep himself together. But failure wasn't an option. Ethan moved as fast as his failing body allowed, pushing through the corridors to get to the control room overseeing the core. The air was thin, making it hard to breathe, but his implants filtered out the worst of the toxins. As he passed by more injured passengers, his mind screamed at him to stop and help, but he couldn't. Not yet. The station's core had to be stabilized first, or there would be no one left to save. Nova's voice crackled again in his earpiece. Dr. Ward, I have temporarily restored partial control to the core systems, but the damage is severe. You must reroute power manually from the auxiliary controls to avoid a catastrophic meltdown. Ethan knew what that meant. They needed to get into the reactor's most dangerous section. It wasn't just radiation, there would be intense heat, volatile fuel leaks, and God knows what else. It would be a death trap for anyone without serious protection. He finally reached the reactor control bay and found Zara already there, her bionic arm elbow deep in a control panel, sparks flying around her. This thing's a mess, she grunted as she yanked out a fried circuit board. We've lost 2 of the stabilizers. We're going to have to reroute power and balance the load on the remaining two. Can we do it in time? Ethan asked, his voice tight. We don't have a choice, Zara replied. You're not looking so hot yourself. How's your ticker holding up? It'll last long enough to get this done, Ethan said, though the pain in his chest suggested otherwise. His vision blurred again as he tapped into his neural implants, pulling up schematics of the core systems. Together, they began working on the reroute, fingers moving with precision despite the chaos around them. Ethan's mind was focused on one thing: keeping the core from melting down. Every second counted. Every wire they reconnected, every panel they fixed, felt like a small victory in a war they were barely winning. Ethan's breath was ragged, and his heart skipped another beat. He ignored it, sweat pouring down his face. He didn't have time to think about what would happen if his heart failed him now. There were still thousands of people depending on him, and he couldn't let them down. Zara worked in silence beside him, her face a mask of concentration. The tension between them wasn't just about the mission anymore, it was about survival. They had been in situations like this before, but nothing as critical as this. Ethan felt the weight of every decision on his shoulders, knowing that one wrong move could send the entire station spiraling into oblivion. Suddenly, Nova's voice cut through the silence. Warning, core temperature rising, reactor breach imminent if power is not stabilized within 3 minutes. Zara cursed under her breath. We're running out of time. Ethan's mind raced. They were almost done, but not quite. He knew there was one more step, one more reroute that would give them the extra stability they needed. But his hands were shaking, and his vision was growing dim. I'll do it, Zara said, seeing his struggle. Just tell me what to connect. No, Ethan said, shaking his head. I've got this. He reached out, grabbing the final connection wire with his trembling hand. His heart was beating erratically, each pulse a jolt of pain. But he forced himself to focus. Just one more wire, one more connection. That was all it would take. His fingers found the port, and with a final surge of effort, he locked the wire into place. The control room lights flickered, and for a moment, it felt like the whole station held its breath. Then the core's temperature monitor began to drop, and Nova's voice returned, steadier this time. Core stabilization confirmed. Reactor breach averted. Ethan let out a shaky breath, his legs threatening to give way beneath him. Zara caught him before he could fall, her bionic arm holding him up. You did it, she said, her voice filled with equal parts relief and admiration. We did it, Ethan corrected, managing a weak smile. For a moment, there was silence in just the hum of the reactor and the distant sounds of the station's automated systems coming back online. The immediate danger had passed, but Ethan knew the battle wasn't over. The damage to the station was still extensive, and there were hundreds of injured passengers who needed help. Nova, Ethan said, struggling to stay upright. What's the status of the rest of the station? Emergency teams have begun containment of the fires in Section 12, and life support has been restored in most critical areas, Nova reported. However, there are still significant casualties in the lower decks, and communication remains intermittent. Ethan nodded. Zara, take the rest of the team and start triage. I'll catch up. Zara hesitated, eyeing him with concern. You need to rest, Ethan. Your heart's not going to hold up if you keep pushing it. I'll rest when everyone's safe, Ethan said firmly, though he wasn't sure how much longer he could keep going. Zara gave him a long look but didn't argue. She knew him well enough to understand that he wasn't going to stand down. All right, she said, but don't think I'm not keeping an eye on you. With that, she turned and led the remaining rescue team out of the control room, leaving Ethan alone with the hum of the reactor and the soft glow of the control panels. He stood there for a moment, leaning heavily against the console. His heart was still erratic, and the pain in his chest hadn't subsided. He knew he was on borrowed time, but he wasn't done yet. Taking a deep breath, Ethan pushed himself away from the console and began making his way toward the lower decks, where the worst of the damage had been reported. As he walked, He tapped into his neural implants again, pulling up a map of the station's most damaged areas. The corridors were a mess of twisted metal, debris, and the occasional flicker of emergency lighting. It looked like a war zone. But the worst part was the bodies. Some had already been covered by the rescue teams, but others lay exposed, reminders of the lives that had been lost in the chaos. Ethan's heart ached, both physically and emotionally. He had seen too much death in his career, but it never got easier. Every life lost was a reminder of the cost of failure. He reached the lower decks and found Zara and the others already hard at work. They had set up a makeshift triage center, treating the injured as best they could. Ethan immediately joined them, pushing aside his own pain to focus on the task at hand. Hours passed in a blur of medical procedures and quick decisions. The Bionic rescue team worked tirelessly, their enhanced bodies allowing them to perform feats of strength and precision that no ordinary human could manage. But even they had their limits. By the time they finished, the station was finally beginning to stabilize. The fires had been extinguished, life support was fully restored, and the injured were receiving proper care. It wasn't over. There would be weeks of recovery and repairs, but the immediate crisis had passed. Ethan stood by one of the medical bays, watching as his team finished up. He felt a deep sense of exhaustion settling over him, both physically and mentally. His heart was still beating irregularly, and he knew it wouldn't be long before his body forced him to rest. Zara approached him, wiping sweat from her brow. "We did it," she said, her voice filled with quiet pride. "Yeah," Ethan said, leaning against the wall. "We did." There was a pause, and then Zara looked at him more closely. "Ethan, you need to get that heart looked at. You're not going to make it if you keep pushing yourself like this." He nodded, too tired to argue. "I will, as soon as we're back on solid ground." Zara shook her head but didn't push the issue. She knew him well enough to know that he wasn't going to change. "Just don't wait too long." As she walked away, Ethan let out a long breath. The station was quiet now, the chaos finally giving way to a fragile peace. But even as he stood there, surrounded by the remnants of the disaster, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The incident with the solar flare had revealed weaknesses in the bionic systems, weaknesses that could be catastrophic in the future. Ethan had always trusted the technology that kept him alive, but now, for the first time, he felt a seed of doubt. Was this the future they had signed up for? A future where humanity's reliance on technology was both its greatest strength and its greatest vulnerability? Ethan didn't have the answers. All he knew was that he would keep fighting for the people who depended on him, fighting to make sure that the technology they trusted wouldn't betray them. As he looked out at the stars through the station's observation window, he felt a strange sense of resolve settle over him. The universe was vast, and the challenges they faced were many. But as long as he was still standing, he would do whatever it took to protect the people who couldn't protect themselves, even if it meant pushing his own body to the brink.